Moving to our top story today, well, when he's not signing books, he's sending off lists of rather critical questions. He's a member of our award-winning investigations team. He's none other than the brilliant Jeff Wicks, my colleague in our Randburg studios. Jeff, black to always have you on. How are you?
I'm good, and yourself? Thanks for having me, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. Very busy time of year. So many engines firing on various cylinders. Let's start here for those who don't know, and perhaps play a very quick game of catch-up for our News 24 subscribers. Who exactly is Imogen Mashazi, this former City of Echolini city manager, and what does she currently stand accused of in the first interim draft recommendations and findings that emanated from the Madlanga Commission? Let's begin with that context.
So Dr. Imogen Mashazi was a two-term city manager of the Echolini municipality, and she was placed on special leave or retirement, however way you'd like to look at it, midway through last year. So essentially she's out of the city's ecosystem, but she finds herself as a central figure in our national discourse because of her implication at the Madlanga Commission. And to explain that briefly, the tall and short of it is that she was allegedly a nexus of control and a conduit for access for individuals like Vusi Muzi Matlala. And, in explaining why she's important, we must understand that, News 24's reporting initially placed Vusi Muzi Matlala on the map where there's access to blue lights. And where Mashazi becomes involved is the apparent purge of senior officers who tried to act against Julius Mkonazi after we exposed that story. So that seems to be what placed her in the hot seat before Madlanga Commission so far.
Right. Now we go a couple of years back. The COVID-19 lockdown is not as strict anymore. Unprecedented times for South Africa and the rest of the globe. And here in 2022, Miss Mashazi, as you've prior revealed for News 24, takes this rather luxurious flight to London, a private chartered jet. Very swanky. She enjoyed what only would be an Instagrammer's influencer's dream for the weekend, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a trip like that and the funding for a trip like that is out of reach for most people. But she and three others were aboard a private chartered jet. And just the chartering of the jet alone on a return flight from Lanseria to Luton Airport in London came with a price tag of 3.5 million rand. But it wasn't, it didn't stop there for the good Dr. Mashazi, because she stayed in the Corinthia Hotel in London, which is in one of the most sought after districts in the city, and a short walk from the Thames and London's very vibrant shopping district, where she shopped up a storm and then came home 3 days later.
Sure. These are things we can only dream about in our lifetime. I mean, notwithstanding 3.5 million rand, that should get you a pretty decent house, even in Cape Town. Okay, so what does she claim? What does she tell you about who bankrolled this trip? And is she still sticking with the version that you're about to repeat to us?
So what we know about this trip is firstly that she and her husband were passengers aboard the flight, and so too were another couple, we believe. It's Dineo Seletswane and a Sandton-based ophthalmologist named Dr. Tebogo Maleka. And, as soon as we started asking questions of Dr. Mashazi, she threw down the gauntlet for us and hit us with a whole range of legal threats about how we were harassing her and invading her privacy. But the tall and short of it is that it was, a trip that beggars belief in terms of luxury, and it took place while she was the sitting city manager. That makes it fair game for journalists. And, is something I've expressed to my colleagues before is that when it comes to officials like Dr. Mashazi, it's worth us making clear that she and others like her will be held accountable for their time in office, regardless of whether or not they've left.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for people who don't know, the city manager role is meant to be non-political. It's an administrative position within municipalities, metros, but it remains critical because these are supposed to be people that are not influenced by anything. They're supposed to ensure that the administration of local government happens, and they are supposed to be impartial as much as possible. But of course, we know that in South Africa, this is all values and ethics that sometimes not everybody feels like ascribing to. In today's reporting, Jeff, you've revealed that the woman who accompanied the then city manager, who's this pharmacist baroness, clinched a rather big deal with the city some months after this trip. What did you uncover?
So what we established was that Dineo Seletswane, who obviously runs a pharmacy in Dainfern, suburb of Sandton in Johannesburg, was aboard that flight alongside a man we believe she was in a relationship with. It's very difficult because very few people would answer our questions in respect of the story. But certainly she, within a year of taking that flight, Ms. Seletswane, through a company that she directs, landed a very lucrative fuel supply tender for, would you believe it, the Echolini Metro Municipality, the same organization that was run by Dr. Mashazi for so long. So, the timing for us was incredibly suspicious. And the contract was awarded through a construction company, actually, to supply all range of fuels to the municipality. It was a 3-year deal. And Ms. Seletswane was paid as recently as mid-February and stands to make further money should she receive additional orders from the municipality up until June.
What has she been telling you, Miss Seletswane? Has she been forthcoming? What is her version of events? You've already sort of alluded to the fact that mostly all the role players here have been incredibly cagey.
Yeah, absolutely, Graham. I think secrecy and evasiveness is sort of a hallmark of how Seletswane and Dr. Maleka have dealt with this media issue. And it's actually the most remarkable thing. I'd actually left a message for Dr. Maleka to return my call, and lo and behold, Ms. Seletswane miscalled me and then cut the call when she realized who she was talking to. We went and visited her at her pharmacy after she blocked us on WhatsApp, and she was quite strident in ejecting us from the pharmacy. She said that she didn't work for the government, she doesn't do business with the government, and she was, very assertive in those claims, almost too assertive, I felt. It was odd to me that someone would just blurt out unsolicited that they don't do work for the government. So then I came back and looked, and lo and behold, she scored this tender within a year of taking the flight. So they've, circled the wagons to a large degree. We had to go as far as delivering written questions to both of them and where they work. And of course, those questions went unanswered. They are unwilling to answer any questions around why the flight occurred and specifically who paid for it. And that's a familiarity we see from Dr. Mashazi, because since we've started working on the story, we have consistently asked her who funded this trip, and she's refused to address those questions.
But even more so, and if anybody's sort of listening up until this point, because sometimes someone might come along and go, so what? They took a private jet, it's all private, it wasn't used with public funds or whatever the case. We've already, as you've shown in your reporting, see that this massive contract is landed with the city by one of the role players in this particular story some months after the fact that this luxurious trip happened. But what did Ms. Mashazi tell you about actually declaring this to the city of Echolini? Because she was still in that job when this trip occurred. And, for public office bearers, notwithstanding journalists who have to declare any particular gifts over a certain threshold of value, it's the same thing for anybody who's elected into office, right?
Yeah, well, Dr. Mashazi might feel that she's somehow the empress of Echolini, but what is apparently lost on her is that during her time in office, she was an employee of the city. And that means that she is liable to the strictures of the gifts and declarations policy of that municipality. And the policy is quite clear. You may not receive a gift from not only a service provider, but a potential service provider. That's a very wide bucket. But the policy goes further and said, notwithstanding the above, any gift or gratuity that is received beyond a value of 350 Rand must be declared. It must be entered into the register so that there's a record kept of this. And the fact that Dr. Mashazi is so easily breezed past the strictures of her own municipality, and when she's meant to be the one setting an example, is quite interesting to me. Now, she says, well, this was a private social event. The gift policy was never triggered and she didn't have to declare it. Well, frankly, she's wrong. She did have to declare it, and the net result of not doing so means that this trip has been kept a secret up until now.
Yeah, it's just, an obscurity of ethics. I don't know. It's completely lost here. We don't really know who else was on this jet, right, Jeff? There's some
Well,
mysterious figures outstanding, right?
no, well, we actually do. It's 4 people aboard this private jet going to London for 3 days. What we don't yet know is exactly who paid for this trip. But I can tell
Right.
you that it will be a significant point of focus for our investigation going forward. You know, the fact that there's so much secrecy from all the players involved in this is suspicious in the extreme. And that just really strengthens our resolve to understand everything there is to know about this flight, because clearly people don't want us walking that path.
Yeah, great. So I just wanted to double check that we weren't missing anybody out here as to who was physically on the craft. We don't know who bankrolled it. And do we know what the current relations are of everybody involved?
That we don't know. And we don't know for the simple fact that people are really averse to engaging with us on this topic. And that doesn't make sense because, the old adage, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. That would apply in this instance. But at every turn, be it in our discussions with Dr. Mashazi, in our attempts to have discussions with Maleka and Seletswane, we've been hit with a wall. And we've been hit with a very scripted wall, where people make clear that they are private citizens and they are not employed by the state. And that tells me that there's some element of coordination potentially happening in the background. But never fear, I at least have an extreme appetite for this story, and I'm perfectly willing to see it through to the end, including publishing the identity of the person who paid 3.5 million rand for high ranking city officials and their contractors to enjoy a 3-day shopping spree in London.
But it may be argued that the City of Ekurhuleni's media relations department, when they see that News 24 email, Jeff, these days, they go, oh, not another thing to have to answer to. Jokes aside, they have been in the news quite an awful lot on many different fronts. And when it's not Sikanati Manchancha, our investigative journalist colleague, looking into the murder of some key whistleblowers from within the city's financial auditing department, we've, of course, have this story as well. And yeah, I mean, what did the city say about all of this, if anything?
Well, the city went as far as confirming that Ms. Seletswane was awarded the contract, which we already knew, and they've also gone on record as saying that they've also gone on record as saying that Dr. Mashazi did not use public funds to pay for the trip. They're filling in the blanks for us to a degree, but I think it's worth explaining exactly why we're advancing this drive into the dealings of the Echolini Metro Municipality. This is an entity that has a budget north of 60 billion rand per annum, and it's no surprise or no shock to anyone that they are coming up so regularly in the news, because Echolini Municipality was obviously a site of capture, which falls into the terms of reference of the Madlanga Commission. Their auditors seem to die quite regularly, which is something of a problem. And the city manager can't follow the rules that she's meant to enforce. So it's merely the start. And the message we've communicated to the spokespeople at the city of Ekurhuleni is brace yourselves, because there will be more coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you want to read a little bit further as to where this entire saga started, you can go back to the 16th of February, of course, using Google, whatever other search provider, Imogen Mashazi's glitzy London shopping spree and 3.5 million rand private jet flit. But this is also sort of key context within the latest report that Jeff has penned as an exclusive for News 24 this morning, pharmacist on Imogen Mashazi's 3.5 million rand private jet landed lucrative Ekurhuleni fuel tender. Jeff, as always, absolutely solid work. I would never one day would like to be on the receiving end of an SMS inquiring about my life. Please, that must never happen.
Duly noted, but it's also worth telling our listeners that I am quite nice most of the time. And yeah, people will have different sort of opinions, but I don't care. But thank you, Graham. Thank you for having me.